you feel crazy, like what is wrong with you, but you still can't take away the pain. It affects every area of your life.
Approximately 2.5% of adults across the globe have ADHD, Attention Deficit Hyperactivity Disorder. For a long time, ADHD was actually considered a children's disease that people just grow out of. But more than 1/3 of people diagnosed as children still struggle with ADHD in adulthood. And in this video, you'll see why especially girls and women often struggle to get diagnosed in the first place. Let's meet Sonal, Janani, and Alicia. They were all diagnosed with ADHD as adults. Many first learn about ADHD in adults from social media now. There has been an explosion of content about ADHD online, with millions of posts on Instagram and billions of views on TikTok. Maybe you also watched some clips and found them very relatable.
So for me, I actually, that kick-started my process of understanding my own ADHD.
On one hand, it's helpful for raising awareness and giving people useful tips to cope. But on the other hand,
it's a very double-edged sword.
A study from 2022 showed that 52% of ADHD content on TikTok is misleading, naming symptoms like clumsiness, thinking your friends hate you.
Can you not do that? It's so annoying. Don't cry, don't cry, don't cry, don't cry.
Or this thing.
It's fluff, it's not evidence-based. So go with information, go for content that looks at evidence, that looks at good research as its grounding.
That doesn't mean these lived experiences of people with ADHD aren't valid. But most of these struggles haven't made their way into the official lists of symptoms, at least not yet. These official symptoms include inattention.
If I'm not interested in the conversation, to quickly space out, very visibly also.
The high level of distractibility, the zoning out, the daydreaming. For a lot of women, that shows up as fatigue and tiredness, just an inability to get started.
That includes problems with organizing and prioritizing what's important, and forgetfulness.
I would rarely hand in assignments, if ever. They would never be on time.
If it starts to feel like my plate is getting crowded, I shut down very quickly.
This sort of paralysis is often described by people with ADHD, although not an official symptom yet.
Procrastination for sure is a big thing.
When everything is a certain way, then I'm going to get started. But the challenge is that sort of perfect alignment doesn't occur.
And the other official symptoms are hyperactivity and impulsivity.
My mind is really chaotic, so people tell me that I tend to go all over the place when I talk.
My emotions were spilling over into every area of my life.
And I would often get into fights with other schoolmates and end up in the principal's office.
ADHD makes it difficult to regulate emotions. That can lead to impulsive behaviors.
Rejection sensitivity is, I think, the most painful experience of having ADHD. Getting very easily hurt and triggered.
Maybe all this sounds relatable to you, but you'll see it's not that simple. Especially if undiagnosed, ADHD causes problems in relationships, jobs, or education.
After my degree, I was burnt out and exhausted, mentally, physically, emotionally.
My life is in complete disarray. And no matter what I do, I can't get it together.
Good news is, there are some pretty amazing strengths that can be harnessed with professional help. More on that later. There is one key to getting there: being officially diagnosed. And that can be quite tiring, especially for women. Even experts acknowledge now there is a gender bias. Hyperactivity was long considered the key symptom of ADHD, with the loud, wild little boy struggling in school being the blueprint example. But ADHD often looks different in girls and women.
It may not necessarily be physical hyperactivity, but more of mental hyperactivity, where they are just consumed by many things.
Girls with ADHD also tend to be more inattentive. So for these reasons, girls have long been overlooked or even dismissed.
I was a teenager in a good school, so I could not have ADHD.
And the prejudice persists for adult women.
The therapist I was seeing at the time completely dismissed my concern because they believed that I had anxiety, that my focusing and difficulties with focus weren't rooted in ADHD because I could sit properly at one place.
So why is an ADHD diagnosis so difficult? First of all, there are no biomarkers that doctors can rely on when diagnosing ADHD. Brain scans, for example, find small differences in the structure and functioning of brains of people with and without ADHD. But that doesn't really mean much. To function properly, our brain needs small molecules called neurotransmitters. They carry messages from one brain cell to the other. The most investigated in the context of ADHD are noradrenaline and dopamine. Dopamine is important for the brain region that helps regulating attention, behavior, and emotion, the prefrontal cortex. And there seems to be less dopamine available in brains of people with ADHD. But this is also true for some other conditions like Parkinson's and some dementias. So, to make the cause and effect connection with certainty, more research needs to be done. Therefore, experts look at signs and symptoms when trying to diagnose ADHD. But finding a professional can take forever.
I found out that there is no standardized way of getting a diagnosis and treatment for ADHD in India, especially for adults.
Alicia, being an adult, actually got her diagnosis from a child and adolescent psychiatrist. So, what would happen when you found someone to assess you? They would ask many questions about your current, but also about your early life.
How often do you have problems remembering appointments or obligations? How often do you misplace or have difficulty finding things at home or at work?
The assessment was very thorough. The psychiatrist asked a lot of questions about many aspects of my childhood. I also brought my mom along.
It's actually very common that family members or partners are asked to get involved in the process too. And then, maybe one day, the long-awaited diagnosis might lie at the table.
I felt vindicated at first. I was right all along, and I was not listened to at first.
To be finally taken seriously, that was also very weird. Like, okay, this feels foreign to me.
After that, I felt a sense of grief because I felt that my life could have been easier if I had been diagnosed at 16 years of age.
This was not all in my head for so long.
Besides a relief, the diagnosis brings the possibility for treatment. That's often a combination of medication, psychotherapy, and skill building. And some of these skills are actually useful for everybody. Use a clipboard or a notebook to write things down to remember. And ask family and friends to remind you of important things. When it comes to staying focused during a tedious task, surround yourself with others. For example, in a library, a cafe, or even an online session. This can give you a sense of accountability. If that's not possible, ask someone to check in on you. Also, transition rituals can help putting yourself into work mode. When a task seems too overwhelming, start with really small steps.
My task right now is just to open a document. That's all. If I do that, great.
You'll notice that oftentimes this is all it takes to get your brain rolling, at least for a little bit.
But in all of this, the core is me letting go of my shame and guards and asking for help.
So, with the right strategies and support, living with an ADHD diagnosis certainly isn't a doom. Actually, there are a lot of things that people with ADHD have to offer.
ADHD has blessed me with creativity, and it has also blessed me with curiosity about a wide variety of subjects. It's also helped me to have empathy for other people.
Like, I can sing also, I can dance also, I can do creative writing also, I can do public speaking. So I dabble into multiple different things.
Creativity, the out of the box thinking, the ability to really drive projects that other people wouldn't touch with a barge pole because they're too scared, and a person with ADHD would be so excited by it.
If I become focused or fixated at something that's beneficial for me, then I can like crack the code. Like I'll be amazing.
And having ADHD, I mean, it's not a deficiency. It just means that we are unique.